This week on the BackTable podcast.
Once you're an attending, there's a significant salary increase. I think number one, anytime you should just have a principle. If you're a medical student or a resident or a fellow or even an attending, every step in your life or when you get a raise, you are going to naturally get more money. And I think it should be something that everyone does. Do not take all of your increase in salary, don't take your entire promotional raise and put it towards a new car or increased expenditure. Every time you get a raise, you really should allocate a portion of that, right, for saving.
Hi, everyone. This is Gina Badalato here, returning back for our BackTable series for trainees. I'm flying solo today without Lindsay Hampson, but I'm so excited to have our guest here, Dr. Sammy Elsamra, who's going to talk to us about financial planning during urology residency, the facts we need to know. Sammy has given several talks about this, and I know was featured at the Young Urologist Forum this past year at the AUA on this topic, and we're really fortunate to have his expertise. Dr. Elsamra, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience and then talk about why this is an important topic for trainees?
Sure. Dr. Badalato, thank you very much. BackTable folks, thank you for having me on. So my name is Sammy Elsamra. I'm an associate professor of urology at Rutgers, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. I've been in practice now for 11 years out of fellowship, and my focus is in robotics, minimally invasive surgery. I spent all this time training. We did 4 years of medical school. I was probably one of the early med students to do a gap year, did a research year. And then I did a 5-year residency at Brown, 2-year fellowship at LIJ. After that, thought all my financial woes would be gone, and they were not. They were just starting, Unfortunately, I think urology residents and residents in general and young people in general just tend to overlook the realities of personal finances. And I think we have an issue where we don't really plan ahead. And I remember distinctly finishing fellowship and I had to borrow money. I mean, if you do a fellowship in New York City, and I think, Gina, you were in New York for quite some time too, and you still are, it's not cheap to live in New York.
It's not cheap.
Yeah. And I had to borrow money to make it through the 1 month of unemployment between fellowship and starting my attending job. So I think right there, that was an eye-opener for me. I also have a little bit of a personal experience, between, and this is a little bit personal, but, I think it's worthwhile. I'm the eldest child of 6 kids. My parents are immigrants, and while they were college educated in Egypt, they came here and started their own business. And I think they have, like many immigrants, have, a sense of being thrifty and wise with how they spend their money and all that. My wife, who's also Egyptian, and her parents also are immigrants, they're both physicians, or one is a dentist and the other's a physician. And they did very well, but unfortunately they lived to their expenses. And you could see, now as they enter the twilight of their careers and they're entering retirement, how that has played on their financial life. So I think it's a very important thing for urology residents to be aware of. Your financial problems are not just going to go away because you become an attending. And I think setting the right habits and understanding your finances from this point is going to be critical for your financial success as you go on through life.
I think that those are excellent points. That was the common misconception even when I was training. Don't worry, once you become a doctor and a urologist, you'll be able to pay everything off, and then it'll be smooth sailing from there. That debt just compounds and things change, and it's important to start thinking early. So while we're on that topic and talking a little bit about debt, what advice would you give for residents about budgeting their income and managing their loans and living expenses while in residency? And then how does that change after residency?
I think the first step is just being very mindful of where your money goes. So I know there's a lot of folks out there who spend, and then afterwards they wonder where they spent their money. And that's a very dangerous mindset because, if you do that now as a resident, as your salary goes up in your later years of residency, or as your salary goes up in attendingship, and you carry on that same philosophy, you're going to find yourself in trouble, because we all know that there's a lifestyle inflation that happens. As your salary goes up, so does the cost of your car, or the cost of your house, and also there's the realities of life. At least most people, right? Or the traditional trajectory. Not everybody follows this path, but like, if you're going to get married, if you're going to have kids, and you're going to buy a house, all these traditional milestones represent increased expenditures that you didn't have to account for before. And if you just have this spend first, think later mindset, you're going to get in trouble. So I think, number one, it's really important to understand and appreciate that, hey, savings has to be a part of what I do with my finances right from the beginning, even as a resident. And I know life is more expensive now than when I was a resident, or Gina, when you were a resident, but I think the salaries have gone up significantly for residents. I think, my gosh, looking at the salaries now, they're almost twice what I made as an intern. So, but I recognize it's still a struggle, but you have a finite amount of money. That finite amount of money, that salary as an intern of like $70,000, is still better than a lot of people. You're better than average in the United States. And so I really think that you can pull it off. You're not poor. And it's a mindset thing. You shouldn't think, oh, I'm so poor, I only make $70,000. It's almost, to the average person out there, that's insulting. So I think if you think about it, I have $70,000, and you apply a 50-30-20 rule, right? That's going to set you up for proper financial decisions. So what is 50-30-20 rule? You spend 50% of your money on your needs, 30% on wants, and 20% on savings. And so that's Warren Buffett advocates for this. Elizabeth Warren advocates for this. All these financial gurus advocate for this. So you need to pay yourself first, which is another way of saying this. Paying yourself first means you save that money for later on. So I think that's a very important concept. Save the 20% first, spend 30% on wants, 50% on needs.
That's good advice. And along that topic, so for that portion that's being saved, is there a particular way that you would suggest saving that? What about investing? Is that something that somebody should get involved in during residency? What's the best way to kind of put away that money?
So I think if you have the framework of, okay, look, I have $70,000, $35,000 is going to go to like my house and my car and my utilities, right? And my food. And then 30% is going to go on like, I kind of want to have, cable TV, if people even get cable TV anymore. I don't know. He spends it on like Hulu and Netflix and like a billion subscriptions. Yeah. So you're going to spend 30% on that. You're going to spend 30% on vacations and all that. And I think you really have to stick to those numbers or those percentages. Your first priority as a resident, right, is to set up an emergency fund. You need to have a 6-month emergency fund. If you can't get a 6-month emergency fund, you need a couple $1,000s in the bank sitting there ready to bail you out if issues come up. Because you don't want to be the kind of resident that lives check to check, and then your car, has a mechanical issue, and that now you can't use your car, and then you got to go into credit card debt. So I think critical issue number one, get an emergency fund. That's part of your savings. That's basically a lifeline for you. The other thing that you should do, priority number two, is get out of any kind of high interest debt that you have. So if you're carrying around credit card debt, you need to figure out a way to really get out of it, borrow money from your family, pay it down, transfer the funds to a 0% balance, and then pay it down. But you really don't want to be paying 18, 20, 30% interest on oftentimes, things that you won't even remember that you purchased. So I think it's really important to, those are your two critical functions as a resident. I think Gina, you're probably alluding to like, okay, let's say you have an emergency fund. Let's say you're not, you don't have credit card debt that you're carrying around. So what do you do with this money? Let's say $70,000 a year, post taxes, you're probably making 50,000, or, for ease of math, let's say 60,000, right? So if you divide that by 12, you're talking about $5,000 a month, right? And if $5,000 a month, 50% of that, or let's say 20% of that is going into savings, right? Then you're talking about $1,000, right? So now you have $12,000 a year that you can do something with in terms of, investment. And I think as a resident, you can invest, and you should invest into a Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA is eligible for anyone who makes under, there's a certain threshold. It's like $150,000 or something a year. If you make under that amount of money, you have earned income, right? You have a W-2 or a 1099, can take, I believe it's $6,000, I think, or $7,000 this year. It changes every year, like all of these taxable items. And so you could put that money post-tax into this investment. Once you do that, you can use Vanguard, you can use Fidelity. There's all these companies that do this. So you could take this amount of money, four or five, whatever $1,000, right? We said you could save $12,000 if you're on the 20% savings plan. You could put that into some sort of, investment product or investment vehicle, right? Like a mutual fund or an ETF. And we could talk about that, I think, later. And then you want to just let that grow. Putting money and saving it is nice, but having it grow is even better. And using compounding interest, or at least compounding profits, is all to your benefit. I mean, just an anecdote about that. I feel like I'm rambling here, so stop me if I am.
This is really high yield, and it overlaps with a lot of the topics that we were covering about key financial principles and like investing during residency, because a lot of these packages are part of your hiring package. You can choose to invest some of this money. So please continue.
No, so I want to just end on this one note, which is, I have a recent graduate from our program. I think he was very, very savvy with regards to putting away money into a Roth IRA and all that. And I think he graduated out, with over $100,000 in savings. So that's amazing. Here I am. I was like, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, not including my educational debt after residency. He graduated and he has $100,000 in savings. And that's, it takes decisions to do that. He didn't live in the fanciest apartment. He didn't eat out every night. He maximized some of the, perhaps the meal benefits at our hospital, right? But he did what it takes. Yeah, he did what it takes. I mean, you're gonna be at hospital long hours anyway. If they're paying for your meal, why not? So but to graduate with $100,000, in savings, that's amazing. That's a feat.
Yeah, that's great. I think the other thing that people wonder about during residency and after, as they start planning for their life after residency, is the different types of insurance that they should be getting. Health, disability, malpractice. Is that something that residents should worry about or start saving for, in your opinion?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, let me talk about insurance in 1 minute. I think what we can do is highlight that the savings that you can do as an attending is very different than what you could do as a resident. And I mean, if you want, we could go over that, or we could go over insurance and go back to that. I just don't want, I don't want to miss out on what folks should do once what they should anticipate doing once they get into attendingship.
Why don't we do that since it's a natural segue, and then we'll circle back to insurance.
Perfect. So once you're an attending and your salary, there's a significant salary increase. I think number one, anytime you should just have a principle. If you're a medical student or a resident or a fellow or even an attending, there are going to be every step in your life, or when you get a raise, you are going to naturally get more money. And I think it is only it should be something that everyone does. That do not take all of your increase in salary, don't take your entire promotional raise and put it towards a new car or increased expenditure. Every time you get a raise, you really should allocate a portion of that, right, for savings, because you want to graduate. And I think the ultimate goal here, right, is you want to graduate with enough money. I mean, different people have different goals, but you want to graduate with enough money that you could retire and not have to worry about anyone feeding you or paying for you or covering your bills or what have you, right? And for some people, they want to do that by the age 50, and that's, there's a whole philosophy about that, right? FIRE, right? Financial independent, retire early. There are people who want to do it at 65, and retirement age is only increasing and people are living longer and longer. So to set perhaps a goal, a very basic goal, you want to have, if you assume a 4% return on your investments, you want to have 25 times your expected annual expenditure. So I think this is very important because it puts into reference how much money you need. That's often a question people ask. How much money do I need for retirement? What is enough? So the minimum, I would say, and it's probably should be more than this, but the minimum is 25 times your annual expected expenditure or expected annual expenditure. So if you bought a house, but you don't need to pay for a mortgage anymore, and you don't need to pay for your kids' education. You don't need to pay for anything. You just need your living expense. If you estimate, let's say, I could live on $100,000 a year, right? You should have at a minimum $2.5 million in savings so that if you withdraw it slowly and it grows at 4%, right, you should not fall into where you're going to draw out all of your money. So I think that's a general rule, and that's a good place to start. When you're an attending, okay, so after you've allocated additional money for savings, after you've had that increase in salary, there's a lot more that you can do, obviously, because you have more money. But also, when you're employed, most employers will have, tax advantage savings accounts, sometimes known as ERISAs. Right. So they're qualified accounts where you could put your money in pre-tax. And when you're at a higher income earning bracket, you remember that mean adjusted income of $150,000 or something below which you could contribute to a Roth IRA. If you're earning more than that, you can't necessarily contribute to a Roth IRA, and you're taxed at a much higher rate. So you can put in money now pre-tax that will spare you from the 30-40% tax bracket that you're going to get taxed at for that money. And it's a no-brainer. So you should maximize the 401k or 401a that your institution offers. I work for a state institution, and so it's great. We have actually 3 pots where we could put in pre-tax. We have a 401a, which is for just, I think most nonprofits have that, a 403b, which a lot of educational institutions have that, and then a 457. The difference between a 401a and 403b, these are very similar, but the difference between those and a 457 is that 457 is technically deferred compensation. So it is money that you can put away just like a 401a or 403b, But the difference is it's technically not your money. You're deferring your compensation from your employer. So if your employer goes belly up, they go bankrupt, they will end up paying from that 457 money that you have. You never took possession of it, but it grows the same. And if you work for a reliable institution, an institution has a long history, most universities are like that, then I think it's very safe to do. Besides the 401a, 403b, and 457, right? There's also the opportunity to save into a similar mechanism if you have a high deductible health savings account or a health insurance. If you have high deductible health insurance where you're responsible for like your first $10,000, right? Beyond that, the health insurance covers, right, for catastrophic issues or something. If you have that, you are able to put away, I think, $3,500, or it may have increased to $4,000 per year, into a similar mechanism, just like the 401a, into a health savings account. The health savings account is triple tax-free. So it goes in pre-taxes, it grows tax-free, and if you spend it on health expenditures, and we're all going to have health expenditures when we get older, right? That comes out tax-free as well. When you have a tax deferred plan like a 401a or 403b, or even the 457, it goes in tax deferred, but the money coming out is taxed. Now, that's different than a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA, and I know there's like an alphabet soup here, so this is a ton of information.
This is really high yield.
Yes, but the Roth IRA is post-tax dollars. So it goes through the tax gate once, it grows tax-free, and when you take it out, it comes out tax-free. And if you're over that $150,000, threshold, there is technically a way to contribute to a Roth. It's called a backdoor Roth IRA. And if you go on Vanguard or Fidelity, they have the mechanisms to do it. Your accountant has to fill out a special form, but I think it's $7,000 or $7,500 per year that you could put into this post-tax dollars, and then you take it out in retirement tax-free. Now, one can ask, well, Sammy, why would I, if I'm going to get taxed on it, later on, why should I say, save tax? Or what's the benefit of doing it tax deferred versus, tax-free afterwards, like a Roth? The principle is this: when you retire, you should have a lot of money in savings, but you're not going to have money in earned income. So your tax bracket is going to be much less. When you're a urologist earning 300, 400, whatever, how much money you make, right? You're taxed at 30, 40, upwards of 50%, right? So any amount of money that you could shield from that tax, right, is beneficial. And then you're going to pay a much lower tax rate when you're in retirement and you don't have earned income, or you have much less earned income. I also think that having some post-tax investments like a Roth is beneficial, because then you could navigate the different, monies that come out over time. So I think all of these are important. There are also like cash balance plans or profit sharing plans that a lot of private practices have, and I would take advantage. The other thing is, a lot of these institutions will contribute free money with a 401a. So there's a match. So it just boggles my mind that people will say, no, I don't want to save. And they don't take advantage of not only the tax advantages and saving, like the healthy habit of saving money, but also they're not even taking advantage of like the money that you're getting matched from your employer. So I think it's really important for us to, be cognizant of all of these things and really capitalize on all these savings.
That's amazing. I think you gave a very high level overview for the audience about really we went from residency to attending hood and all the options and really granular definitions. Do we want to revisit the insurance question in a couple minutes about what people should be thinking, since we're on that phase now of pre and practice? What types of insurance, how much that costs, how much money should be budgeted, malpractice? Thinking you've covered retirement, but anything else, disability, how much money should be set aside from that? Is that something Obviously your employer will often cover, but is this something that someone should be thinking about when they're budgeting?
100%. So I get a lot of this information from White Coat Investors. So I recommend everybody follow that podcast if you have the opportunity. He's got 2 books out there, but there's a dozen or so books that have been published over the past 5 years about all of these things, and they're all very high yield. And I think insurance is very important for us to appreciate when we need it and how we need it. So if you go and you buy something expensive nowadays, automatically you're going to say, do you want to get insurance for this, right? Because you've spent a lot of money. You're going to buy a trip, right? What do they say when you check out on the ticket? Oh, would you like to buy insurance for this trip? By the way, for these, wants, things that are not that critical, I don't really buy insurance for those kinds of things. Because if they break, it's okay. Gina, I know you have spent many years training to become a urologist. I've spent many, all of our listeners will spend upwards of 7, 8 years in, post medical school, right? Training to become a urologist, right? Those are 7, 8 years of your prime earning ability. That's in addition to 4 or 5 years of medical school, right? So there's nothing more valuable than your ability to earn money. Okay. Not your house, right? People have homes, home insurance, right? People have cars, they have car insurance, right? It is mind-boggling, right, that you don't have insurance if you've spent this much and invested this much of your time and life, right, and lost opportunity if you're not insuring your occupation and yourself. So I would say that's number one. Insurance is critical. If no one relies upon you at all, then maybe you could forego life insurance. Okay. But if you have anyone that depends on you, if you have a spouse or a significant other, right? You got parents who may depend on you, definitely kids, right? Anyone who depends on you, then you need to get life insurance. Okay. Now, life insurance is important because there's a caveat out there, which is if you go and you try to buy insurance from someone who is trying to sell you a product, you gotta be careful because there's a lot of financial advisors out there who will try to sell you whole or universal insurance. And whole and universal insurance, it's very expensive. It's probably 8 to 20 times more expensive than term life insurance. All you need is term life insurance. Okay. The whole or universal life insurance, they have investments baked into it. Those are typically poor investments. 75% of physicians regret buying whole or universal insurance. It becomes a liability. So whatever you do, do not buy whole or universal insurance, buy term life insurance. And it's relatively cheap. It's nice. It pays a tax-free cash benefit upon your death. There are employers who offer term life as well. And if they take that money out pre-tax, the benefit is taxable. Whereas if you're putting post-tax money into term life insurance, if you pass away, God forbid, the benefit to your beneficiaries is tax-free. Generally, the recommendation is you should have like $2 to $5 million for most docs to cover your kids, to cover your spouse, to cover your mortgage, to cover, their expenses. You shouldn't worry about your loans because if they're federal loans, because federal loans are forgiven if you pass away. So number one is life insurance. And I'll add a little bit of my own caveat to that. If you are a urologist and you're saving appropriately, right? And your life insurance is 2, to 5 million that you need, and you've saved 2 to 5 million. Well, there you go. You probably don't need to have life insurance anymore, right? Because if you pass away and you've allocated your beneficiaries appropriately, right, you don't need to pay it. So if you've saved 2 to 5 million and you're in your 40s or 50s, there you go. You don't have to pay life insurance anymore. So I think that's life insurance. I think that's important. You can get it while you're in residency. You should get it if you're in residency, if someone depends on you, right? But they're going to limit it based on your income. The next thing is disability insurance. So disability insurance, there's two types of disability insurance, broad category, okay? One is short-term disability, right? And one is long-term disability. So short-term disability is disability that's less than 90 days. And if you saved for an emergency, if you've saved enough money to have an emergency fund, right? You should have enough money ideally to float you for 6 months, okay? So if you have that savings, you don't need to buy short-term disability, right? And oftentimes your employer will cover you for short-term disability anyway, or you have long vacations banked up, or, there's a lot of ways around it. Long-term disability pays a monthly benefit if you are disabled greater than 90 days. The benefits are tax-free unless the premium is paid by your employer using pre-tax dollars. So you could generally insure 60 to 70% of your income, and you need enough to cover your current savings or current spending and retirement savings. And I think it's important to realize that the big kicker here is you could generally insure 60 to 70% of your income. So as a resident, if your income is around 70K, you can only get disability insurance to cover 60 to 70% of that, right? Up to 50K or something. When you're an attending and there's a big jump in the salary, right? So now you're going to need much more disability insurance to cover that amount of income and to cover probably your expenses, which have gone up obviously because you became an attending. And herein lies a really nice nugget for our medical students and for our residents, which is before you graduate residency, you must buy disability insurance. So I didn't do this, and I got older and I got health issues. I'm very mild health issues, but someone prescribed me Scalaxin once because I had back pain. And when you go through an insurance exam, they find everything. And so they're going to say, oh, he has back pain. So my premium is so much more expensive. So while you're young and healthy and you don't have, any scripts or medical issues that have come up, you should get disability insurance. When you buy disability insurance as a resident, right, there is a future purchase option where you can buy more insurance without the need for an additional exam. So you'll have that premium, that really nice rate that unfortunately I missed out on.
That's a great tidbit. I don't think many people realize that, including myself. This was an amazing, high-level, really comprehensive overview of a lot of things I wish I had known going into training. As we think about closing out this session, you mentioned The White Coat Investor as a great resource, a book to read or series to read. Are there any other resources that you would recommend to the resident audience? And what if somebody's thinking about getting a financial advisor? Is this something somebody can do during residency? How would you recommend going about finding somebody?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think regarding having knowledge about this, I think I could provide you a list of books, but I mean, just really quickly, I want to pull up The White Coat Investor has 2 books, The White Coat Investor and then Financial Boot Camp. I think for the psychology of money, and just understanding the importance of savings, there's a book known The Millionaire Next Door. Great book, goes over, overachievers or over accumulators of wealth and under accumulators of wealth. And I think it's really important to get that. The one thing that your listeners must have if they don't have this sound financial understanding, if they're not already White Coat Investor podcast followers and stuff, is if you just Google If You Can by William Bernstein. It's like a 16-page PDF that really goes over the skeleton of all of this in a very understandable fashion, and it's free, legally free, online. So If You Can, William Bernstein, go out there, read that. I think Jonathan Clements, How to Think About Money, Phil DeMuth, The Overtaxed Investor. There's a book called The Psychology of Money that I've been listening to recently, which is really good. And I think there's a sequel that came out. So there's a lot of books out there. I do think that you have to be knowledgeable in this space, you're probably going to be too busy if you're a urologist. And I don't know what happened to my time. I just got busier and busier, and it's almost like I got what I wanted. I wanted to be a busy surgeon, and here I am being a busy surgeon. I'm like, gosh, what happened to all my time? And your free time gets taken away too, because you have responsibilities to your spouse and kids and your community and all this kind of stuff. As you get older, all these responsibilities only increase. So it is beneficial to have a financial advisor, but my advice is to find a financial advisor who will not charge you fees under management. You don't want someone who's taking a percentage of how much you have saved. That just doesn't make sense. I would recommend that you find someone, and on the White Coat Investor webpage, they have several really good advisors that are there. You should pay them for their time and pay them handsomely for their time. And you should learn about everything so that you go in understanding what the recommendations are, and also, going at it, not getting blindsided, not being sold, because there's a lot of folks out there who will give you bad advice, who will try to sell you whole life insurance or try to sell you all sorts of things that you don't need. And I think it's very important to be knowledgeable, because you can't win the game if you don't know the rules, and the rules always change too. So you have to keep reading, you have to keep following this stuff, because the rules change.
Great advice. And I think that's a great way to end the episode. You can't play the game if you don't know the rules. And it sounds like a lot of this is your own reflection, and we kind of trained in the same generation, kind of learning this the hard way. And I think that this is coming from a place of somebody who wants to help the next generation and learn from that and come out stronger. So we really appreciate your time, Dr. Elsamra, and thanks to everyone listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badalato. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, DM us at _BackTable Euro on Instagram, LinkedIn, or X. BackTable is hosted by myself, Ruchika Talwar,
Jose Silva,
and Suzette Sutherland.
Our audio team is led by Kieran Gannon, with support from
Aaron Bowles,
Gabe DeGrazio,
and Josh Spencer.
Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz.
Social media and PR by Chi Ding.
Administrative support provided by Judy Dela Cruz.
Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.